Minutes past the 8 o'clock hour on Friday, June the 16th. Chris Lenois back with you on the Green Mountain Mornings program up until 9 o'clock. Joining us on the phone for a conversation about news and issues that affect the community, the deputy editor of the reader-supported independent news and views source for Windham County, The Commons, free on stands every Wednesday, online at commonsnews.org. Randy Holhut, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, Joyce. Appreciate you tuning in from upstairs in your compound in Dummerston. And Randy, you want to start with one of the stories with your byline on it this week, a conversation you had with Senator Tim Ashe, who is the president pro tem of that legislative body. They're all heading back up to Montpelier next week for this veto session over, I guess, what has been known shorthand as the $26 million thing. When we're talking about teachers' health insurance negotiations, the governor's proposal to take that to a statewide level, claiming these savings of up to $26 million a year for taxpayers. Democrats like Senator Ashe in opposition to this plan, saying it's taking away collective bargaining rights for teachers. Before we get into the issues, was this your first time talking to Senator Ashe?
Yes, it was. And they reached out to us, and apparently they did a full court press on all the media outlets.
Yeah.
Because to try and get their message out, which is a smart thing for a newcomer like Tim to the leadership position that really hasn't much of a profile. I mean, we all know him as the disclaimer.
Right. and absolutely, Peter Sterling, who I think is known in this area through his work on health care. Now, Tim Ashe is chief of staff, reaching out to myself. We had a radio conversation with the senator, and I found him to be a pretty good interview. Yeah,
he's... It's a heavy lift to go from being one of the 30 to the person in charge and having to take all the abuse that comes with being the person in charge. But he had very nice things to say about Becca Ballant, one of his lieutenants, and has had a big role in keeping the caucus together.
Yeah, and overall seemingly positive about the direction everything is going, staying positive despite this impasse, despite really not much happening this week as far as negotiations, at least out front. I know there have been negotiations behind the scene between the governor's aides as well as the members of the Senate and the House, but we're not hearing anything other than some back and forth in the media about trying to correct the record as to who is putting out more accurate information. So I wonder, especially since it was also my first time talking to Senator Ashe, whether his optimism was genuine or was it political. I don't know if you got a sense about that.
I think it was genuine, but the main thing is that Governor Scott threw this thing into the pot right at the end of the session. It didn't look like an awful lot of research or thought went into it. Hard to adjust to something like that being thrown in at the last minute, and particularly with something that in nearly every case has already been settled and negotiated at the local level. And you're going to turn around and say, no, rip up those contracts, this is how we're going to do it.
And that's what the governor did at the beginning of the year too, right? I mean, this was with the with the school budgets.
And it just seems like Mr. Scott's trying to take a page from the Scott Walker playbook out in Wisconsin, and it's not going to work.
So you don't think that? I mean, some people are saying, I had Laura Sibilia in here earlier, the independent, and she's a member of the Dover School Board. The School Boards Association in Vermont wants this statewide negotiation. The Vermont NEA, the teachers union, is talking about Scott Walker or President Trump, this erosion of collective bargaining rights. So you don't think that's necessarily overstated?
No, it's not. I mean, the problem is people in education are well compensated, as they ought to be, for the job that they do. And unfortunately, the rest of us aren't. They get pay and benefits that were collectively bargained that the rest of us don't have. Is it our fault that the 90% of us that don't belong to a union in America are getting hosed in our paychecks? or that we have to attack the people that do have a strong union that looks out for their interests.
And to Senator Ashe's point, and I believe he made this point to you in your article, and it was something he said to me when I interviewed him, the plan that he put forth, the counterproposal, still tries to achieve these savings, but does buy time. I know that there was like some sort of like, we're going to make these temporary agreements, and then we're going to take this up after we've had the discussion that we probably could have been having if the governor didn't propose this after the budgets had been voted on. And that to me is, I don't understand why we can't get past that point. If it is a situation where we don't have this, as the governor says, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do this, because it doesn't sound like that's necessarily the case.
Well, that's always the excuse that gets whipped out when you want to make a big change. You got to do it now. This is the only chance you're going to have to do this now. This is don't worry about what the details. Do it now. Do it now. What's happening in Washington with the health care bill,
right?
That the Senate doesn't want anyone to see,
right? And then you also have a situation here with the teachers. And as you said, the health benefits are one of the draws. You have a governor who talks about making our education system here in the state of Vermont one of the draws for recruiting families. Hey, you want to have your students have a great educational experience? Move to Vermont. What are you telling the teachers about that if you really are taking away some of the things that are benefiting them the most? We're not going to be able to recruit the best and brightest teachers without being able to offer them some really great benefits because we're not going to offer them the same salary compensation that other states can.
Yeah, because we are down toward the bottom in terms of pay and benefits.
Right. So I don't see how this, and that part of it isn't made clear as far as, and the other thing that isn't made clear is what are they actually going to do with this $26 million? If they do reach that level, it still hasn't been outlined, at least to my level of satisfaction, as to what exactly this money is going to go towards.
I don't know. To me, it sounds more like the classic case, and you've heard the term before, hippie punching.
Hippie punching, yes. Oh my!
Where, when conservatives do things that are designed just to tick off a constituency,
right?
And in the case of Democrats, the teachers' unions are one of their biggest supporters. So how do you do that and limit their political power? Come up with a law like this that affects their collective bargaining leverage.
Yeah, and whether this gets passed or not, I think the ultimate goal here for the governor is the political leverage that he can say, hey, I had a plan to save taxpayers $26 million. I think that's going to be a powerful message whether he passes it or not this year for 2018, don't you?
Yes, unless you say, what sort of plan was it, and how was it presented, and does it really save that money? I'm still, being part of the reality-based community, want to see a little bit of data and facts behind it before you whip out a number.
Yes, indeed. Well, we'll see what they're able to resolve next week when they get together for the veto session. And that is one of the stories on the front page of this week's edition of The Commons with Randy Holhut's Byline. We'll talk about some of the other stories from this week's edition of The Commons, free on stands every Wednesday, online at commonsnews.org when we come back after the bottom of the hour news break. 60 degrees outside at 21 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Scott Ainsley leading us into this conversation, part 2 of our conversation with Randy Holhut, Deputy Editor of your reader-supported, award-winning news and view source for Windham County, The Commons, free on stands every Wednesday. Commonsnews.org is the website where you can go and become a member and support all the great work done by Randy and the rest of the staff there at The Commons. Jeff Potter, the publisher, and many other titles, I think, for Jeff these days, right, Randy?
Yes.
And just one. And then also, of course, Wendy Levy and Mike Fair, two of the staff writers there. I want to talk about one of Mike's stories with you now, and continuing in the school vein. Over in Dover, see how I did that? Over in Dover, a do-over on the Act 46 vote that they took to merge in the Windham Central Supervisory District. This side-by-side plan with some of the river towns and Townsend and Newfane and places like that. And Dover, it seemed like one of the places that it was going to be most cut and dry when they voted in favor of this merger, but not so fast, right?
Yes, there's always the small print, the fine print.
The fine print. Yeah. So what happened here? What is the issue with this question? Their question was different than the question being asked of voters in other communities. Well,
on the ballot, the voters saw this sentence: No elementary school shall be closed without a unanimous vote of the River Valley's Unified School District Board and an affirmative vote of the town in which it's located. Okay. Sounds innocent enough.
Right.
But the Articles of Agreement, as they were approved by the Board of Education last December, only called for an affirmative town vote before school closure. No mention of the school board being unanimously voting. So that means the Dover voters, they approved the merger plan to make it harder to shut the school down if they had to.
Now, this is the big fear of anybody who is skeptical or dead set against Act 46, is the closure of their local school. I mean, that's really the red line in the sand for a lot of people, or the thing that people say, well, this is going to lead to our school closure. So it's understandable that people want those assurances, but it has to be consistent from community to community. It's interesting that it was in Dover. I would say that Dover is probably, of any of the schools in that group, that is probably least likely to close.
Well, they wanted to make sure of that.
Right. But they wanted to just make extra sure of that. So it seems to me that reading Mike's article here, the school board chair kind of took it upon himself to do this, Rich Werner.
Yes.
And you can't just do that unilaterally as a school board chair, but he took responsibility for this. I mean, he just added this language and didn't check with anybody else first?
Well, he didn't know, but now he does. So that's why the do-over comes on July 11th.
Right. And interesting to note that, I guess, in an attempt to reassure residents, the Dover School Board now endorsing the plan, and they hadn't before, from what I understand. Were they against this merger plan before, or they just didn't want to put their approval on it?
Well, they shouldn't have had to, but this guy forced them into it.
Right. Right. So this next special election on July 11th, and then ultimately this creates a unified school district with just one town, right? Because Marlboro is still the outlier here. They still have to deal with whatever they're going to have to deal with. Yeah,
but this is most of the Leland and Gray towns, anyways.
Right.
That were involved in that in the current Wyndham Central.
Yeah. They're the other side of this side-by-side district. And they're pretty much on board at this point with their part of the plan, from what I can understand.
Yeah, but Dover was the only town that didn't do it correctly.
Right, that had this extra layer of protection against school closures, which is going to be taken out. And I guess that could affect the vote, right? If people read that and now it's not in there, that could alter the vote. This is not an insubstantial change as far as what people are going to be deciding on.
Well, with anything, as Mike pointed out in the story, Wyndham County has had extraordinary problems dealing with Act 46, with all the extra votes and all the arguing and all the concern about maintaining local control.
Yeah, well chronicled in this story. Another front page story in this week's edition of the Commons. Another education-related story. I guess the other stories that I wanted to cover with you this morning, Randy, I guess we could call it Infrastructure Week, much like they called it in Washington last week when we're talking about bridges and cell towers and things like that. Now, people thought the I-91 Brattleboro Bridge project was something that caused some headaches and delays. I got a feeling this Brook Bridge project, as much as they're trying to fast track it, cutting off that bridge that basically bisects Guilford now and no way around it other than to go through Bernardston and Vernon is going to be very problematic to some residents in Guilford.
But the good news is it's only a month.
Yeah. Well,
when you have the bridge, basically, as the picture that with Wendy's story illustrates, when you have the bridge sitting there,
right,
waiting for you to just drop it in, that helps. That's reassuring, and with all the incentives also to finish on time, I think that the disruption will be at a minimum. It's going to be a sucky month for anyone who lives in that neighborhood. But after it's done, you got a new bridge.
Yeah, especially if you live right on the other side there of the center of Guilford and you just want to get into town. And great job by Wendy to kind of talk about how the post office is helping deal with some of this and different things. The key will be, again, communication. Remember the Green River Bridge, was that last summer or 2 summers ago?
That was last summer. That
right.
was They only opened it just in time for school this year.
Right, and a lot of people feeling, again, being cut off and not necessarily in the loop on what's going on. And you can only do so much as a town government or as a state government to get people informed. Do you think people in Guilford are informed enough about what's happening and the time frame for it that there won't be an outcry?
Well, just like the I-91 project, they have a person who's sending out email blasts every week updating the media as well as citizens about what the state of the project is and this week and what to expect for the coming week.
Yeah. Well, and we're still waiting for that finalization of that I-91 bridge. I just saw that the deconstruction of the old bridge now expected to go through mid-July. They were supposed to have that wrapped up before Memorial Day.
Well, weather probably was a factor with that, but it's still been moving along. And, of course, on the northbound side, you have a bridge.
And
the southbound side's about to open fully, I guess, too.
Not just a bridge, 2 lanes of road. It's been a refreshing change whenever I've had to head north. But I'm going to, I guess I just won't plan any country drives through Route 5 and down into Massachusetts during the month of July. 'Cause it's always nice, kind of a change of pace, not having to take the interstate and drive down Route 5 to get to where you need to go south of here.
Well, you can always go Guilford Center Road and go through Leiden, and you want to go Baja and through Green River and Bernardston to get to Greenfield.
Right, or 142 through Vernon as well. You got a couple different options there, indeed. Yes. But that is one of the infrastructure stories in this week's edition of the Commons. 2 others, both by Mike. One in the front section and another in the town section about cell towers. One in Brattleboro, one in Townshend. Now, the Brattleboro one is still in the proposal stage. Filings with the Public Service Board to put one in the Center Congregational Church right in downtown Brattleboro. Amazing to think that they can do this and not have it, be bad for the view shed or any of the things that come with whether it's the actual cell tower or some of these fake trees that they put out here. They feel pretty confident that this is not going to be obstructing the historical value of this Center Congregational Church steeple in any way.
Well, cell companies have had some experience with this, with locating towers and silos and church steeples and other man-made structures that you can hide the towers better. I mean, the key is that it's not going to be as effective as a standalone tower,
right?
Unshielded by a corn silo or steeple, but it will do what Verizon wants to do, which is improve its signal downtown. There's just enough elevation with the steeple and enough space around it so the signal will take care of the downtown area, which is what they really want.
So it's incremental improvement in service. And then again, as technology advances, they might be able to improve what they already have in place there while still preserving what downtown wants, which is this kind of pristine, bucolic downtown look, especially that the Center Congregational Church provides. Mike Fair doing a good job of recounting some of the history of that. And then it's also a win-win for the folks at the Center Congregational Church, isn't it?
Yeah, getting the rental fee money from Verizon.
Right, rental fee without tenants. I mean,
that's always the goal.
Always the goal. I mean, this is a model that's well established, but something that you could continue to see, especially, again, as technology advances, being replicated more and more in some of these rural areas, achieving really an economic development goal for the state of Vermont, which is being kind of wired in a better way without having to put wires up everywhere.
Well, considering the goal was universal coverage in Vermont, Peter Shumlin got close to achieving that goal, but didn't quite get there. But compared to other places in rural America, Vermont is way ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
There's still places where dial-up, where satellite service is how you're getting your internet, and cell phone service, forget it.
Yeah, and it's innovations like this, like figuring out how to put in, cell technology without having to put up a monopole or a cell tower. Similarly, Mike's story about Grace Cottage and Coverage Co. and all the work they've done in the West River Valley along Route 30 to try and improve coverage. To think in this day and age that any hospital doesn't have cell service, to me, really is unthinkable, and Grace Cottage being the last one now. But really important when you think about the patients and their families coming to a hospital facility like Grace Cottage.
Yeah, when you figure how many people now are totally dependent on their cell phones, they drop their landlines to just use their phone as their primary point of contact. Take that signal away, and they're cut off from the world.
Yeah. Coverage Co. is the name of the Massachusetts company. They've done contracts with everybody except AT&T, which will be interesting to see when they can get that on board. But you can now make cell phone calls from the Grace Cottage Hospital campus, and that is certainly a win for Grace Cottage. Again, when you're healthcare, a very competitive field here in the state of Vermont, you want to feel like you're catering to your customers in this case.
Yeah, and having you really need to have it. It's inexcusable not to have cell phone service.
Yeah. Rounding out our conversation with Randy Olet, as we typically do with sports, and with graduation tonight for the Brattleboro Union High School, Bellows Falls last night, Twin Valley last week. I think Leland and Gray is next week.
Tomorrow.
Oh, that is tomorrow. Okay, so that's weekend as well.
If memory serves, they always do a Saturday morning.
Right.
But of course, since I don't have children in any of those schools, I have no idea.
You're going to be sleeping in tomorrow. But this will be this sports section in this week's edition of the Commons, will be the last one covering spring sports for the year, I'd imagine.
No, there's still some sweepings to get in, but the main thing is that it was kind of ironic that the nicest day of the spring season for a game was that one game in Townshend there between the Rebels and the Green Mountain for the softball semifinal.
Right, the 8-7 come from behind win, which sounded like a great game that you covered. Well,
if there's two coaches that I cover regularly that can get the most out of their players consistently, it would be Bob Lockerby up in Bellows Falls and Tammy Clausen in Leland and Gray. She has a knack for handling her players and knowing when to push and when to ease off, and constant encouragement. And a telling moment was right before that seventh inning, with the game tied up, gathering the players together and having them take a deep yoga breath, to kind of close your eyes, breathe in, breathe out.
Yeah, well, there's a reason they're a tough team every single year in Division III. Now, it didn't end up panning out for them in the finals, losing 11-2 to Oxbow. But nevertheless, still a great season for the Leland and Gray Rebels. People can read about it in this week's edition of the Commons, free on stands, as well as online at commonsnews.org. Thanks for your time this morning, Randy. We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay.
All right, and we will be back to wrap up this edition of the Green Mountain Mornings program right after these messages.